so you can see a lot of things. And here's a just map of our region. Well, you guys already know, but Stanley Park's a good place, Pacific Spirit Park, Rifle Bird Sanctuary. I guess you're going there tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. That's down here. And then another place is Iona, Iona Island right here. There's a wastewater treatment plant there that sounds kind of gross, but you actually can see an amazing variety of species there. And I think one reason British Columbia is kind of interesting is you have this history of the ice ages. So in North America, this is North America now, but and we have all this green forest here in British Columbia. But go back just 18,000 years, and this is what it looked like. There's ice over most of Canada. And the ice gradually melted, and the last place the ice was. So it melted off eastern Canada, and it sort of melted up here. But there was still a big chunk in like central British Columbia. It's the last place the ice melted. So what happened is these forests moved like this, and they eventually met in northeast British Columbia. And so now we've got these forests here that came from these different areas. And in these two glacial refugia, there were bird species that had become a little bit different. And now they've come together. And, well, examples further south are the indigo and lazulite bunting, and the bullocks and Baltimore oriole have contact zones down here, but they're relatives. And so some of our research looks at this area up in northeast BC, the town of Tumbler Ridge. Are any of you from that area, Peace region? No? It's a pretty area. But in that area we have all these western species. These are all western species. They meet all these eastern ones. And you can see they're related, the Pacific and winter wren, McGillivrays and mourning warbler, and so forth. And anyway, it's a neat area. So British Columbia is neat in a lot of ways. We have these migratory forms coming through. We have east meeting west, and it's just a really cool place for birding. Yeah, I think I'll stop there and just see if you guys have any questions. Yeah, I have like the major groups of birds in British Columbia, but we're probably low on time. So maybe if you guys have questions. Yeah.
So the west and east, those two types of birds are the result of speciation. So they were originally one species, and then because of isolation.
That's
so
right. That's the idea. That eventually they were, if you go back far enough, they were one species. And so all of these pairs, so the Pacific wren and the winter wren, they look nearly identical. But we did this genetic work and song work on them. Turns out they sing different songs. You can go up to northeast BC and find some birds that sing one song and some that sing a different song. And from the songs, you can predict what genes they have. So we looked at mitochondrial DNA and then a bunch of nuclear DNA. And they're very, very different. And the estimate is that they've been apart for about 3 or 4 million years. But they still look similar. They sing different songs.
They have been apart for 3 million years?
3 million years, yeah.
But it has been only about just now 18,000.
Yeah, so it gets complicated, doesn't it? So the ice ages have been happening for about 2.5 million years. That's the Pleistocene. But there have been about 30 cycles of ice and then warming, ice and then warming. the ice cycles last about 100,000 years on average. So that last ice age, the glaciers melted 12,000 years ago. But a species like this, it was probably separated and then sort of came together and separated, came together. And eventually those two different things became different enough that they don't interbreed now, so they're different species.
Is that the definition, the official definition? They can breed together?
Yeah, the official definition of species that most biologists use is the biological species concept. So if two things cannot interbreed in a meaningful way, then they're separate species.
Like naturally?
Naturally.
They don't breed each other?
Naturally they don't.
Okay.
So they don't, we looked at genetics, and it shows that they're not exchanging genes. Very, very different. And that's true. So in other cases, though, it gets more complicated. Like these two, Audubon's and Myrtle warbler, they hybridize where they come together in the Canadian Rockies. So they look pretty different. This one has a white throat and a yellow throat and gray cheek and black cheek and a big white eye stripe. They're pretty different looking, but when you look in the Canadian Rockies, you find hybrids between them. You find all combinations of hybrids. But the hybrid zone is narrow. So what we think is happening there is that they're hybridizing. They can interbreed, but there's something, the hybrids are not as high fitness as the pure forms.
They would die off and...
They die more often. They don't reproduce as much. We've got some ideas of why.
Speciation. So it's in
Yeah.
the middle now.
And then speciation can continue, sort of. And the next ice age then comes and sort of separates them again, and they get more and more different over the next 100,000 years. So we think these cycles of ice ages have led to these species pairs getting more and more different.
One last question.
Yeah.
What's the shortest example of speciation happening, like complete speciation?
Oh, in birds, there's a lot of debate about how to define speciation. So you'll get a different answer from different biologists, but at least a lot of reproductive isolation can develop in just 10,000 years. That's pretty clear. But not complete reproductive isolation. So after 10,000 years, you can get really big differences between things, but they still can hybridize some. So, but the hybrids aren't as good. But then to really have it go to complete reproductive isolation takes more like 2 million years, something like that, or 1 million, something. Other questions? Yes?
Is it true that birds of the same species, like different populations, that they can have different dialects of song?
Yes, that's right. So, so that's cool. Sometimes it's like this case where we notice different dialects, and then it turns out they're very different species, like they have different genes. But in some species, you have dialects where genetically the different dialects are quite similar. So a good example is the white-crowned sparrow. In California, they did this study, and they found many little local dialects that were in different places. But in that case, it looks like birds can move between dialects. And then the males are the ones that are singing, and when they move to a new dialect, they learn the new song. So it's more of a cultural variant. It's kind of a little bit more like human language dialects in a way, that the birds can move between them, and then they learn this new way of singing. So you guys are going to rifle tomorrow? Should be fun. Okay. Well, thank you. Hope you see some cool things.
What can we expect to see?
The rifle, I think the snow geese are there. So there are about several thousand snow geese that go there every year. Do you have something?
On behalf of the
Wow.
I'd like to thank you
Oh, thank you very much. That's nice of you. You didn't have to do that. Thank you. That's great. Should I open it here?
Sure.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's great that you have this club. I think it's really cool. So it's a good job organizing it. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you